Masechet Sanhedrin Daf Lamed He Amud Aleph, around 11 lines down. Today's daf is sponsored by Dr. Ezra Dayan in honor of his other new niece, Vivian Sarah. Mina Hani Mili. How do we know that monetary cases can be finished the same day versus capital cases need to be at least the next day? Mar B'Hanina Damar Kla Pasuk says Milati Mishpat Tzedek Yelin Beha Ve'atam Midat Tzahim Rava Mamar Hacham Rava B'Difim Pasuk Asheru Hamos Asheru Dayan Shemei Hametz Dino. It's good for a judge to keep a delayed judgment for a capital conviction. The other opinion holds Asheru Hamos Lo Hametz. He learns that Pasuk teaches as follows: that encourage the victim of the theft, not the actual thief itself. Right, Yani, encourage the person who was robbed, not the one who committed the actual theft. You should try to take, if there comes out, let's say, for example, the guy who claims that he wasn't paid back, and the other guy claimed, yeah, I didn't pay back because you destroyed my security. Take care of the guy who's owed the money first with the loan, that we definitely know he's owed money, and then handle the security afterward. Treat the guy who's really at fault before the possible second fault. B'idach, other opinion, what does he learn? Hai milati mishpat may avid le. What does the second pasuk? Kidrei Elazar Amar Yitzchak Amar Yitzchak Elazar. Amar Elazar Amar Yitzchak. Kol ta'anit shemelinin bo tzedakah. Any fast day that they delay giving the food to the next morning, ki'ilu shofechtem means if they kill someone. Shenemar milati mishpat tzedek. This is if you're full of judgment, which means that back then they used to hand out food to the poor people so they could have their break fast after the fast day. Therefore they said, if you wait another day to give them that break fast, it's as if you killed the guy. The only time where that's considered killing the guy if you delay the food is if you're giving him food that's readily available to eat, like bread or dates. But if you're handing the guy cash or wheat or barley, which is raw and still has to be processed, then the next day is okay because he's not depending on it because it's not ready to eat. Next, therefore we don't have trials for capital cases on Erev Shabbat or Erev Yom Tov because we need to wait another day. We don't want to wait 2 days. My time, you can't have a good time to do a verdict. If you want to do the trial on Friday, and you want to do the verdict same day on Friday, not allowed. Because maybe you might convict him, and you have to delay the verdict till the next day, and therefore you can't delay too long. If you want to try him on Friday, then do the verdict on Shabbat if you're trying to convict him. Then try to execute him on Shabbat. And you can't execute on Shabbat. Maybe you want to execute him the night after Shabbat. Nope. And you have to execute him during the daytime, as we said. Maybe you want to do the verdict on Shabbat and then kill him on Sunday. Also not good. You are causing him to have anguish over his verdict. So we have a halakha that if someone's on death row, if someone's being executed, you do not keep him an extra night in jail, execute him the next day. Don't keep him in 2 nights. Nowadays with the courts of America, you could be in death row for 45 years. That's causing unnecessary anguish. Now let's try another thing. If you want to do the trial on Friday and then do the verdict on Sunday, also not good. Because they might forget their first arguments. They might forget what their arguments were. Now the Gemara says, even if you want to say, we know the Mishnah later on says that you have the people who are writing down everything that's going on, the arguments for conviction, the arguments to make him patur. Even though yes, you're writing down the actual words that were said, however, the feeling and the heartfelt reasoning is not recorded. That's in the judge's heart, and therefore I might forget it. And therefore we don't do a capital case on Friday to be continued on Sunday. Now that we mentioned things, we mentioned that the verdict, the execution will not be able to be pushed to be done on Shabbat. It doesn't push off Shabbat. Now we're going to get into that a little bit. So he says, burying a met mitzvah, a corpse that you found on the street, with nobody able to take care of him, it's not to bury him. Maybe you're allowed to bury him on Shabbat. It should override Shabbat because of a kav hamer. Why? Uma avodat Shabbat, just like a korban that's doche Shabbat. Kivurat met mitzvah dochayotal mi ula'ahoto. The met mitzvah pushes off the avodah. If you have to bring a korban, it pushes it off. If you have to bring a korban and you find a met mitzvah, you have to bury him before doing the korban. So, therefore, we see from here that if you're able to bury somebody instead of doing the avodah, then and if that you're able to bury someone to do avodah instead of doing the avodah, then you should also be able to execute somebody instead of burying them. You should be able to bury somebody. You should be able to bury somebody instead of Shabbat as well. You should override Shabbat. Now the Gemara is going to prove, where do we know that you're able to bury someone instead of bringing korban? Tanabata says, Pasuk says regarding Nazir, you should not become tameh for him, father, mother, brother, or sister. Why is it mentioned each thing? We brought up proof what it means, father, mother, and now we're brother. Now we're talking about why to teach sister. To teach you as follows: if someone is trying to bring a korban pesach, or do brit milah for his son, then he heard someone like a relative passed away. Maybe he might think he's able to make himself tameh to bury that person. Therefore, the pasuk says, don't be tameh. Maybe just like you can't be tameh for your sister, you can't be tameh himself to bury a mitzvah, the corpse. Therefore, the passage teaches you for your sister. You can't be tameh for your sister, but you can become tameh for a corpse. So we see from here that to bury someone overrides the mitzvah of korban. So now, Shabbat regarding Shabbat, you're able to do avodah, you're able to bring korbanot. So now, therefore, by that logic, you should be able to bury somebody on Shabbat as well, because burying someone knocks out korbanot, and korbanot knocks out Shabbat. So, if A is stronger than B and B is stronger than C, then A is stronger than C. The Gemara says, no. Execution of a murderer is a knock in that logic. It knocks out that logic. Why? Because executing a murderer also pushes off the avodah korban. But it does not override Shabbat. The Gemara says that it's Shabbat. Well, one second. How come execution should also override Shabbat? From the following kavachomer, like korban, it pushes off Shabbat. And you could still kill somebody instead of bringing a korban. Pasuk says when you're trying to kill somebody, even if he's a kohen and he's about to bring a korban, he's at the mizbeach, take him from the mizbeach and kill him. So therefore, Shabbat if Shabbat gets pushed off from the korban, the execution that pushes off a korban, which is stronger than Shabbat, so execution should push off Shabbat. How come we can't execute on Shabbat? What is the pasuk teaching you that you should not light a fire on Shabbat? Gemara says, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? There's a machloket about what that teaches you. According to Rabbi, it teaches you that lighting a fire is isur malkut, not isur duraita of mita, not killing somebody, which we don't hold like. Either binatan or halakitza, but according to binatan, actually teaches you that it is considered a separate melacha of fire that you'd be chayab mita for. Because then it says, "Hava'ara le'lavetzat devri b'sev re'natan amar le'halakitza." Right, the mahloket over there is, as we just said now, fire was mentioned in the Torah to teach you, according to Rabbi Yossi, teaches you that it's Isur Malkut, and Rabbi Natan says no, it's Melacha Doraita of Shabbat, the B'yachayamita. So the Gemara says, Elamarava, Tanam Shavot Kashlet. The Braita, we said earlier, we turned to bring a question. He says, no, he doesn't like the word, the dwellings, where you live. You shouldn't light fire where you live. Mashavat Matumar, what is teaching you? Mechti Shabbat Hava Hagutri. Now, technically, Shabbat is an obligation on you. It's not an obligation that's talui in anything else. It's depending on the garment that you're wearing. Mezuzah needs a house. You don't put a mezuzah on the floor. So, however, Shabbat is a personal obligation. No matter where you are, Shabbat takes place. And Shabbat, an obligation that's dependent on you, applies no matter where you are in the world, in or outside Israel. The Torah to write wherever you are dwelling. To teach you, one rabbi said in the name of Rabbi Ishmael, the pasuk says, the man committed a sin that he needs death. Sounds like this applies whether weekday or Shabbat. What does the pasuk also say that someone who is mechal Shabbat shall die? This refers to other milachot besides bedin's mitah, besides bedin's execution. Or maybe you can do an execution of bedin on Shabbat. We're not sure. What does it mean that the pasuk says that he should be put to death? You only execute on weekday, not Shabbat. Maybe you say that it even on Shabbat. The first passage says, the Torah says, don't light any fire in all your dwellings. Ulan also says over there, with the wording dwellings. to teach you that it applies by bedin, both of them, but the one first bedin, the other one first bedin. Therefore, by do not light a fire on your dwellings on Shabbat, and the execution for Shabbat is terefa, and therefore it can be at least, and therefore the burning is referring to the execution. And therefore it says don't light a fire for execution on Shabbat. That's our proof. Okay, Amar Baya. Hashdamar in the Sicha Shabbat. Now you know that Shabbat is not pushed off for execution. In the Sicha Dohayat Abuda Mika Vachomer. Then maybe executing a person should not override the Korban from the following Kavachomer. Umash Shabbat, in the time of Shabbat is pushed off for Korban. In the Sicha Dohayata cannot be overridden for a murderer. Now we're doing that inverse of what we said earlier. Avodah shehi dohet Shabbat. Now regarding a korban that does push off Shabbat, so execution should not be able to push it off because it can't even push off Shabbat. Oh, but we have a pasuk that clearly says it. You take the guy from the mizbeach, he's about to do a korban, and you kiss him to kill him. So it sounds like you can override murder. You can execute instead of korban. The Gemara says, maybe that's a pasuk only referring to a private korban, a guy who's bringing a private korban, his personal korban that is not overridden. The Gemara says, if that's the case, we can also prove that we should also be able to say a kavachomer, that the murderer executing a guy should not override a korban even for a private korban. Why? Because ma yom tov shenidchem mipnei korban yachid en letzicha doche oto. Yom Tov, that is pushed off for a private korban. If you want to bring a private korban, some opinions say that you can bring it on Yom Tov, yet you can't execute it on Yom Tov. Korban yachid shudoche Yom Tov. Now, a private korban that is overriding Yom Tov, enudin shlo tiyeh letzicha doche oto. So therefore, executing a murderer should not push off a private korban. This makes sense according to the opinion that whole that you can't bring korban, private korban at Yom Tov. And there's no kavachomer because we just said that you can't bring it. According to the opinion holds that you can bring private korbanot on Yom Tov. We have a kavachomer seemingly saying that executing the guy should not override it on Yom Tov. Should not override a private korban. The Gemara says, no, it's not a kavachomer. Because why? That does not apply from the pasuk of me'im mizbechi, taking him from my mizbeach. Right? Because he's saying that me'im mizbechi sounds like you're taking him away from any korban, not private korban. Even according to the that you don't bring private korban to Yom Tov. Haktiv me'im mizbechi. What does it do with the pasuk? Mizbechi hamiuchad li umanu tamid. This is referring to not a private korban. It refers to my korban, a special korban for Hashem, which is what? The korban tamid. The korban tamid is brought every single day, and it says even if he's trying to bring the korban tamid, which is a communal, which is a korban for the entire Bnei Israel, you still can't kill him. You still can kill him. Pasuk says you kill him, which overrides the korbanot.